Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the extraordinary council meeting dated Monday the 21st of August 2023. Welcome to everyone here in the chamber. I should perhaps also tell you that this meeting is being live streamed and is available to view on YouTube. So hello to everybody on our YouTube channels who are viewing in and looking in. You're very welcome. Right, okay, let's kick off with apologies. I've had 2 apologies so far from Councillors Marie Bailey and Robert Pritchard. Ben Price, there is a question mark over. Do I have any other apologies? Councillor Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Apologies from Liam Bone.
Liam Bone, thank you. Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Ben Price has currently got a hospital appointment that's vastly overrun, so he'll get here if he can. If not, can we please submit his apologies?
Thank you very much. Thank you. No other apologies? Thank you. Right, any declaration of interest? That all looks very, very in order. Right. We move on to item 3, which is to receive any announcements from the Mayor, the Leader of the Council, Cabinet members, or the Chief Executive Officer. I've just got a couple of things I really want to just mention. One, they're both dates actually, if you could mark them in your diary with red pens, because the first one concerns Heritage Open Day, which is on Saturday, September the 9th, and from 10 o'clock to 2 p.m. I shall be in this very chamber hoping to meet anyone who wants to have a look around the council chamber and the mayor's parlour. I'll be explaining the pictures and the artworks and the silverware and anything else that I can about the work of the council. So hopefully 1 or 2 of you may be able to pop in, bring your family members, and have a look around and see where we all occupy. This is where we spend all our time. And so that's on September the 9th. The next is a Christmas celebration, which we're organising. There will be 2 nights of carol services at Tamworth Parish Church on the 15th and 16th of December. The 15th of December will be a carol service at the church involving everybody and anybody. On the Saturday, we'll be having a civic carol service. Well, it will be involving everybody, but civic people will be invited to attend to it. We're having a civic Christmas party in here prior to the carol service from around 5 to 5:30. We will then process up to the parish church and have a carol service at the church. I promise you it will be a proper carol service with all the very best known hymns. It will have every cliche, every Christmas cliche thrown into it, and we'll all come out of it singing "Wish You a Merry Christmas" and anything that we can, because we intend to make it a really good Christmas event, and I hope as many of you as possible, well, hopefully all of you, will be able to come along to that. Right, thank you very much. That concludes my little pieces. The Leader, have you any announcements to make?
No, Chair.
Thank you very much. Any members of Cabinet, do you have any announcements? Councillor Jay.
Yeah, thank you. 2 things. One, we just want to put it on record. Congratulations to the Lionesses yesterday. Hope everyone enjoyed it. Bringing the country together and doing better than the blokes. Tomorrow we have the first of the pop-up engagement sessions at the town hall for residents. We're going to have 1 per month. So if anyone's watching this or anyone here has got any issues they want to discuss face-to-face, downstairs from 10 o'clock tomorrow morning with the first pop-up session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Okay. The Chief Executive, do you have anything? No. All right, thank you very much. Right, we'll move swiftly on to Item number 4. Matters referred to the Council in accordance with the overview and scrutiny procedure rules. Before we move off into this, this particular thing, I just want to actually make clear that the reason we're here is to discuss this issue, which is a very important issue and involves people, some of whom I perceive are at the back of the room. We are here to discuss the issue, and we're not here for any political posturing or grandstanding from any corner of the House or any political persuasion whatsoever, from anywhere. This is not a political issue. This is real people's lives, their homes, and we are here to look after their interests and protect the interests of the leaseholders and the ratepayers, as well as ensuring that proper procedure is followed and that all legal requirements are made and followed correctly. So please heed these words, because if we do drift off into political spheres of silliness, I will stop things, because that's a waste of everyone's time and there is no need for it. So I hope I've made that very clear. Right, without any further ado, may I invite the Councillor Cook to present his report. Councillor Cook.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. We've cast here this evening because a motion was moved at corporate scrutiny on the 20th of June 2023 to refer the matter of the leaseholders, certainly in regards of these 44 leaseholders and the matter of their roofs, to full council. The reason scrutiny felt compelled to refer it to council rather than cabinet was, on the 23rd of February 2023, myself, former councillor Chris Cook and former councillor Michelle Cook, too many Cooks, attended a cabinet meeting, as I said, on the 23rd of February 2023 to present 7 recommendations to actually try and delve into the issue that's developed over these particular leasehold and these roofs. Cabinet accepted 6 of those recommendations, passed the motions, one of them being a report would be fetched back to the next cabinet meeting. Well, 7 cabinet meetings have passed since then, and yet a report is not to be heard. As I pointed out to officers on the 20th of June, 4 months after the original recommendations to Cabinet, not a single recommendation had been started, never mind finished. So basically, we took the decision as a committee to bypass Cabinet on this occasion because Cabinet had had its turn and refer it to full council for a full debate amongst all of us to actually how do we take this matter forward that seems to have got bogged in the mire. That being said, Mr. Mayor, I think there's a lot of questions still before us. Since I moved the motion that it went to full council, and I believe the Labour group submitted 5 letters to have it delayed to do some more research, more and more questions just keep coming up. So I think I'm open for a lively debate this evening, Mr. Mayor. Basically, you're absolutely correct in what you say. This is about the lives of these people in this room, not political grandstanding, and I'll do my very best to behave. I just hope that actually we can open our eyes and our ears tonight. Actually, this issue is more complicated. I think some of us are being told. It really, really is, and I hope the debate's going to fetch that out tonight. Just like to ask for a clarification on procedure, Mr. Mayor. I assume we're going to go into questions first, then into debate?
Correct. Yes, we will be.
Sorry, just to clarify, Mr. Mayor, I can ask the Leader of the Council on the portfolio the questions given the nature of the portfolio area, correct?
Correct.
Thank you very much. And obviously, because I fetched them open as Chair of Scrutiny, Mr. Mayor, I open myself up to questions as well, should any member wish.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Right. Okay. So presumably you're moving that we move into... do we have a seconder, I beg your pardon?
I don't think there's actually a motion yet, Mr. Mayor, because no one's actually
Well,
moved as
the motion is...
that we debate it, and we are doing.
Right.
So we just go into debate or questions?
Yeah. Right. The questions. Are we moving into questions of the portfolio holder or the leader? anyone.
Thank you very much. I have about 37 questions. I've actually counted them, so there are 37, and actually it floats between the leader and the deputy leader, depending on what answer I'm seeking.
Can't see a mechanism. Who presents the...
Councillor Cook, we're at a bit of a problem here. We've got this, which is your report and your proposal. That is what we're discussing. Nothing else. Nothing else is in order. This is what we're discussing this evening. Are you all right with that? Councillor Cook?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. If you read the agenda before us this evening, item 4, a report was submitted from the Chair of Corporate Scrutiny, which is myself, and the agenda, which went out to the public, which is a public agenda, stated there would be a follow-up report from the portfolio holder stating the Council's position. That is what I wanted to debate. However, no such report has been forthcoming, which does potentially put us in breach of the Access to Information Act 2012, but that's a side matter I'll take up with officers. Instead, we've had a briefing note from a senior officer rather than the portfolio holder that has not been made public to these people here present. I would like to get into the meat of that, hence I have some questions for the leader and the portfolio holder of why, when a report was promised, none has been delivered. This is a public document on a public agenda, yet no report has been forthcoming. So basically, can we just not deliver that report, even though the agenda delivered publicly says we will?
Right, okay. Councillor Cook, I'm going to ask Councillor Smith to respond.
I was going to say, if that's okay with you, Mr. Mayor, I would like to respond to the question of why there was not a report under the purview of the portfolio holder.
That seems to me to be a perfectly valid, proper thing. Okay. He's going to respond to Councillor Cook. Councillor Smith?
Yeah, just want to make some comments in regards to this issue. So I'll try and bend down, quite tall. Right, so I just wanted to make some comments as to why there wasn't a report under my name. So I have drafted some comments just to make sure I cover all areas. So you may have observed that while the executive of Tamworth Borough Council has thoughtfully produced a members' briefing report for this meeting, there's been an absence of a report falling under the purview of the portfolio holder. Allow me to offer clarity on this matter through the following disclosure. Upon assuming the role of portfolio holder for housing and planning this May, a responsibility I am deeply honoured to undertake, I swiftly recognised the pressing nature of the leaseholder's charges predicament. The state of affairs surrounding this issue has reached a critical juncture, evident in the shared frustration of leaseholders and members alike. The matter appears to have persisted for an indefinite period, and viewpoints have grown more entrenched and regrettably somewhat politicised. Since taking on this portfolio, my primary focus has been to examine the provided information. Throughout this process, I've endeavoured to take into consideration the perspectives, views and concerns of leaseholders. I've engaged in numerous meetings with council officers and thoroughly reviewed all available data. My observations on this issue have remained largely consistent, including the importance of responsibility recovering legitimate costs through the service charge rather than the housing revenue account. However, several concerns have emerged that revolve around the following key areas: quality and availability of data, confidence in the procedural framework, quality of communication and interaction with leaseholders, lack of uniformity in approach. These concerns, amongst others, I believe have contributed to a prevailing sense of unease, apprehension, and reduced confidence among leaseholders and members that all aspects of the issue have been comprehensively addressed. To propel this matter forward, I propose a reset in the form of a strategic review of the leaseholder charging issue. Given the current circumstances, it is evident that there are unresolved concerns and divergent viewpoints among members regarding the Council's approach to this matter. It is also crucial for us to re-evaluate our information and ensure its clarity. The difficulties encountered in establishing the facts on certain aspects while formulating a portfolio report suggest that clarity of this issue may not be as robust as needed. While this issue has rightly garnered significant attention, it may have drawn focus away from other priorities. If not addressed effectively, we risk revisiting the issue repeatedly. In light of this, I have initiated discussions with Rob Barnes, Executive Director for Communities, to instigate a corporate project for a strategic review. This review would receive external support, incorporating legal and professional advice, as well as insights from best practices adopted by other housing providers. I am enthusiastic about including a consultative element involving leaseholders and suggest that scrutiny committees nominate members for a collaborative working group. This approach would also facilitate a reassessment of resource requirements and data-related challenges. Considering the upcoming review, it seems impractical to proceed with any further Stage 3 consultations. Current outstanding Stage 3 notices for the roofs will be withdrawn. Non-urgent works should be postponed unless compelling conditions necessitate immediate attention. This strategy bears the risk of delaying certain matters. However, I firmly believe that issuing additional Stage 3 notices without a clear consensus-driven position on this issue and without addressing members' concerns would only replicate current challenges. The primary goal of this strategic review is to re-evaluate the Council's approach to leaseholder charging, devising a policy that aligns with legislative regulations, best practices, and effectively addresses concerns raised by both leaseholders and elected members. Moreover, it should ensure that rightful charges are collected while upholding the maintenance of housing stock. I'd like to list some key objectives I will be including in the review. Confirm the compliance with legislative regulatory requirements. Validate the procurement process, work assessment, and programme delivery, ensuring a full understanding of what works are needed per property. Enhance engagement with leaseholders, potentially establishing a leaseholder forum for continuous dialogue. Incorporate best practices from other providers. Elevate transparency and engagement through effective data management and communication. Involve key stakeholders, including elected members, leaseholders, and tenants in the review process. Align leaseholder charging approach with broader council objectives, such as aiding vulnerable individuals, environmental protection, and affordable housing. Independent legal review of relevant processes. Independent review of procurement and assessment methodology. Independent review of engagement and communication approaches to develop the mechanisms for ongoing engagement with leaseholders and tenants linked to the regulatory framework. Independent review to ensure adherence to best practices. An impact assessment in relation to the Council's wider ambitions. To ensure the success of the strategic review, appropriate resources must be allocated, including external legal advisors, consultancy support, technical expertise, and external project management assistance. The persistency of this issue has loomed over leaseholders, members, and the Council for an extended period. While this comprehensive strategic review may not offer an immediate solution today, its initiation marks a significant step towards achieving clarity, understanding, and resolution. By delving into the complexities of this issue, involving key stakeholders and seeking external expertise, we are on a trajectory that promises to bring us closer to a conclusive and equitable resolution. This undertaking, I hope, is a reflection of my commitment to transparency, fairness, and the responsible management of our housing assets. While this review will have its challenges, I do believe this path is necessary to achieve an outcome that is well informed, well considered, and in the best interests of all parties involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. That was the verbal report that you promised. Is that a proposition?
Yeah, I can move this as a motion.
Thank you.
I have the specific information here. So my motion would be to carry out the strategic review as I've just outlined, and which includes the specifics of withdrawing existing stage 3 consultations and pausing the issuing of any further stage 3 consultations until the completion of the review, unless there is an urgent need for works to address issues of health and safety or structural integrity.
Thank you, Councillor. A seconder? Thank you. Right, we'll now move into questions. Would anyone like to open, Councillor Cook?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to clarify, the 44 leaseholds we're speaking about, that does confirm the 44 leaseholds, everything will stop until this council properly reviews. Did we get it right or did we get it wrong?
Yep, that would have my support.
Councillor Cook.
Apologies, Councillor Smith. I just want to really clarify. It doesn't have your support. That is the motion, correct?
Just to confirm that is the motion, yes.
Right, anyone, any more questions? Councillor Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor, for your statement. It just would have been really useful if we could have seen that. As you can appreciate, that's quite a few pages of words that we've had to take in there. And I support what you're doing. I just really want to make sure that when we come to the end of this, the leaseholders are not in exactly the same position. So I want this to be meaningful. I want there to be something different at the end of it, and for it not to take too long as well. These people have just waited for too long. It really isn't fair, and we need to get going now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bain.
Yeah, thank you for the motion. And obviously we would support the idea of a strategic review. What I am concerned about is how long this has been dragging on and the impact it's had on the people sat at the back of this room.
Councillor, can I just stop you? This is questions just at the moment rather than debate. Okay.
Just about to ask the question. And I think it follows on that the quicker we can get this done, the better it is for everyone. So is there a very clear timeline in your mind? Because if we do not resolve this very quickly, then the difficulty these people have had will simply continue.
Yeah, good question, and definitely something I have been thinking about quite a lot. Now, the problem is, what we have had is we've been stop-starting this for God knows how long, for years. And different people have been in different positions, and, people are having to re-educate themselves and all sorts. The problem is, we don't want to go too quick on this because we don't want to miss anything. And there's a whole load of information. So my thinking on this is minimum, we're probably looking at 6 months, possibly upwards to a year. But at least they'll know at this moment in time that everything has been paused, as I've outlined before.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else? Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, thank Councillor Smith for that motion. I think it really does take us in the direction some of us have been fighting for a while, so really thank him for that. My question is simply this. Obviously, in the briefing note submitted by Mr. Barnes, it does state that any delays this council enforces, if costs of the repairs go up in future and it's found these roofs need repairing, those costs still legally must be forced on the leaseholders. So by us calling for this review, as I do agree with, are we potentially forcing future costs? We have to find a mechanism to stop those costs escalating. We really do. We need to enter this. I'm going to quote Councillor Oates very quickly. It is a question. I'm going to quote Councillor Oates very quickly, and he was always right when he said this. Councillors sometimes spend too long trying to find out how not to do something rather than how to do something. Can we now put some effort into finding a mechanism to protect them from them future costs, please?
Thank you, Mr. Cook. Councillor Cook, sorry. Right, so you're talking about inflation there, inflationary costs. Yeah, it's a real contentious issue because you're talking about ever-increasing costs, as we've all probably realised. The problem is the legal advice, you know, from what I've seen so far is ultra vires on this. You know, I can't answer that. To be honest, and that might have to be something that we have to go back to officers on to get confirmation. But that's all I can say on that at this moment in time.
Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, this will be teased out by the working group. We'll ask the question anyway. Can I request that, obviously, Councillor Smith and Cabinet members and officers take a look at the ruling from the February 2020 tribunal heard by the Right Honourable Justice Tipples in the case between Dr Peachnick and Oxford City Council, where it was upheld at tribunal that repairs leaseholders have to pay for, but a complete renewal or improvement is a different matter entirely, and the tribunal held up that the leaseholders didn't have to pay for a complete renewal if the roof was within economical repair. There is case law out there now. So I suggest we really take a look at that.
What was your actual question there, Councillor?
Just some comments.
Oh, we are in questions at the moment.
It's okay.
Would you like to respond?
Yes, I can respond. Yeah, I mean, you know, interesting. I can't say I specifically looked at that issue, but, you know, if that needs to be brought into this strategic review as a case, then why not? I'm all for transparency. If the legal advisors, should we say, you know, determine that that sets a different course of action, well, so be it. But we'll, you know, obviously have to see what they say.
Thank you. Right. Okay. We are in questions at the moment. I'll be with you in a second. Yeah, Councillor Oates. No, it was a dramatic pause.
23 years and you forgot my name. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've actually got two questions, so I'll throw them in together. One is, what is the impact on the Housing Revenue Account capital programme of this? Will there be any reprogramming or reprofiling that needs to take place? And that relates to the point that Councillor Cook raised about health and safety issues. So if we delay a repair, does that turn into a bigger problem? And the other one is, can I have assurances that this piece of work that we're going to spend 6 months on, which seems quite excessive to me, that we're going to keep it simple wherever we can? I heard in the introduction, I've not been able to read the papers, I've been busy this afternoon. I heard in the introduction that there was a suggestion of a leaseholder forum. A leaseholder forum will bring a whole layer of bureaucracy and governance and meeting agendas and communications, etc., going out. Can I have assurances that we will keep this as simple as possible? And the reason I asked for those assurances is former Councillor Cook was mentioned earlier. I know when she was portfolio, she asked for better communications around leaseholder repairs and charges. Councillor Farrell did the same. I did the same. Councillor Cook did the same when he was leader. We have repeatedly asked for better communications with leaseholders around the capital programme. The HRA has a 30-year business plan to it. Surely we know what's going on next month, the month after, and in 6 months' time. So I want assurances on that, and I'd like some clarity on the impact on the HRA capital programme and whether there's going to be any movement in reprofiling that spend. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Smith.
I can't be massively specific, but what I can say is I have asked the question about the HRA and the effects on the capital programme. I don't believe there to be a substantial effect at this moment in time, but of course I would want to be getting more information on that and responding back to you within a suitable time. What I'm interested in here is that we reevaluate the procedural process. Now, I've got no concerns necessarily that there's been any legal failings by Tamworth Borough Council. My focus is of course making sure that as information comes in, it's reevaluated in the correct way, and decisions are made based on that, taking in the concerns of leaseholders. And yeah, I mean, moving on from that, the forum, look, I totally get that there can be, it can get a little bit messy, but you know, I'm in this role as portfolio holder. That's probably hasn't necessarily happened before. You know, I'd like to take some leadership on this and actually, you know, maybe direct a lot of, the information that gets passed around in these kind of forums. So, and hopefully make sense of it, you know, considering my connection to TBC and my role, you know, hopefully there can be more of a reciprocal dialogue, because I think that's what actually hasn't happened so far. So yeah, that's what I would be saying on that.
Councillor Dean.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I've now got 2 questions. The first one is around the communications. Councillor Oates has just reminded me how much people have queried the kind of communications they've had on this, and that's been a problem for us all the way through as we've been looking at it. I'd like to be assured that communications will be better this time, that there will be some face-to-face. We were told that somebody had gone round and spoke to each of the leaseholders, but the leaseholders, as one of the ladies down there is laughing at this, she obviously didn't get a face-to-face with any of our officers. So I would like to make sure that we don't just rely on Facebook or whatever it is, that we're actually speaking to people personally and doing this properly, getting the feedback from the people. Yes, the forum will be great, but it won't encompass all 44 properties. The other thing is around the costs. We've had a lot of talking about how the leaseholders managed to get a quote for £12,000 and they were quoted £37,000. I would like you to be looking at how much difference there is there, why that difference is. We have asked several times for a breakdown of that cost, which we haven't seen. So I'm hoping that when that does get looked at eventually, there will be some clarity on where that cost eventually comes from. Thank you.
Councillor Smith.
Yep, good points. So communication, actually speaking to a couple of leaseholders, that actually was mentioned and totally agree. Why not go beyond and actually have more face-to-face contact rather than a piece of paper in black and white with no particular humanity to it. So yeah, I totally accept that. Cost-wise, as far as what I've seen, you know, we've got the breakdown of material costs. That's one aspect of it. There's other costs as well. So to do with like the contractors and their, you know, social responsibility. That again, I can actually say that I'd rather have more information on. So I do agree with you, and that's what I'll be working on to get more costs, so you can actually see line by line what they all relate to.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As hard as I've tried asking our professional officers this very straight question, the answer always comes back very, very all over the place. So I'd just like to ask Councillor Smith, and I don't think that any of this is Councillor Smith's fault, but I'd like to ask him his opinion on it. As we've said, we have a 30-year HRA business plan. What's been calculated from the stocks conditions survey, even though it says in the officer's report it's a guess, it's literally what it says, it's a 30-year HRA business plan. We have calculated as a council for our sections of this roof, we are financially better off over 30 years replacing now. Once we have taken that decision as a council, we then decide the leaseholders just must do the same, whether that's in their interest or not. Would you agree with me? This is all predicated on our 30-year business plan to force costs now on leaseholders to suit our financial need. And actually, we need to think better in future. Thank you.
Councillor Smith.
Yeah, again, I can't go massively in specifics on this. HRA business plan. So I'm taking advisement from those officers, the executive essentially, who manage the business plan. And my understanding is that, the charge being brought on by the HRA would have, issues with that. That's all I can say at this moment in time. Again, as I've said before, I think we probably do need a little bit more of a breakdown. We need to have data that presents more of a long-term feeling. And yeah, so that's something I've got to come back to you guys on this.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Daniels.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Smith, my question is reassurance on language and timings. You said yourself just about making sense, and we've had Councillor Oates also talk about the document we received, which was from one of our officers. It came out on Thursday, and like Councillor Oates, many of us with working full-time may not have had fully time to digest that information. When this report is concluded, will there be sufficient time for all members to digest, and indeed the leaseholder residents whom this affects, to be able to read it and clearly understand it? Thank you.
Councillor Smith.
Yeah, so accepted on the report. That wasn't under me, under my portfolio, that report. You know, so I was at the mercy of the executive of that report coming out. You know, and they brought it out in the way that they saw fit at the time. If certainly there are any further reports on this, and I'm sure there will be, you know, that will have the emphasis of it being essentially under my portfolio. So I don't see any reasons why there'd be any problems with timings in regards to that.
Thank you. Councillor Wade.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is going back to the costs. Instead of the leaseholders having it implemented of what we, the council, recommend, why don't we do what everybody else do and get 3 quotes, 1 from the council and 2 independent quotes? Then that way we might come up with a better deal for the people behind of us. Thank you.
Councillor Smith.
Yeah, I mean, there's a procurement process. It goes out to tender. Essentially, you know, leaseholders have the option to nominate, you know, contractors. But in reality, you know, I'll be honest, you know, it's difficult because they're having to set themselves against, you know, bigger players that fulfill the regulations. That's the reality of it. But I definitely think that issue needs to be further explored, and it will be.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kingston.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question sort of follows on from Councillor Wade's here, and it's more to do with clarity about what you said. Your report was excellent, but it was very wordy, and I know that you have to write reports in that way so that officers can interpret them in using technical language. But for the benefit of myself, the members watching, or not the members, the public watching and those behind, am I right in thinking that not only are you going to stop now any processes to do with this whilst the review takes place, but also you use something along the lines of per property? So in other words, are you going to do what was asked originally of this council and go and independently look at each property to see what work needs to be done? So some properties might very well need a complete roof, but other properties might need just a little bit of work doing on them. Obviously, there's got to be a case of some life expectancy in the roof built into it. But can you just clarify that for me and the people here in the room and those watching at home? Is this a case of you are going to make sure that every single one of these residents' properties is going to be assessed and then a decision made as to exactly what work needs to be done before a price is established? I mean, we could talk about the price. I mean, I know that these good people have had quotes in for considerably less than £36,000, and I can talk more about that when we get to debate. But just let's focus on that one point about individual properties. Is that going to happen?
Well, so far what's happened is that the properties have had a survey. Now, I would admit the survey, the way that's been written out, isn't particularly great. It could be a lot better. I'm sure it fulfills, you know, the legal obligations, but it could be better because it doesn't really specifically say, you know, what the actual fault necessarily is. That's then saying that the journey from the fault to the singular fault, for example, to the full renewal or full replacement is a bit disjointed. So, for example, if, you know, the surveys are saying, well, the felt is, you know, rotting, needs replacement, well, lo and behold, the tiles need replacing, or they certainly need to be moved and reevaluated. in that sense, so that further increases the cost. But it doesn't, I would agree, you know, the surveys that we have at the moment don't particularly answer those questions very well. So that does need to get better. A lot of this is determined not just on the surveys, but also the stock condition data. Again, I'd like to see more information in regards to the stock condition data, and you know, see where that goes. I mean, essentially, what a lot of that is saying, well, it's an age thing. You know, these roofs are, you know, 40, 50, 60 years, or they're after the so-called lifetime. So, you know, but that needs to be spelt out better, I would say.
Councillor Kingston.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Smith, you haven't quite answered that question in a simple enough way. What I'm asking is every single residence, is every single property going to get an independent survey to assess what works need to be done, taking into account there needs to be an extended life? You know, whatever surveys have been done in the past, from my understanding, haven't drilled down and surveyed every single property. They've sort of surveyed every other property or every third property. What these residents are after is a fair deal really, is every single property surveyed to establish what work needs to be done and then a bill for those works. So that was my question. Any chance of a direct yes or no answer?
So unfortunately, there's a little bit more to yes and no. So I mean, it depends how you define, independent survey or surveyor. I mean, these are actually looking at the information. This is an independent surveyor. I mean, essentially, it's been contracted to a surveyor company or surveyor who's qualified surveyor. So there is that. So it depends how you define that. You know, it's not somebody who's necessarily directly employed by TBC. It still goes out. So the other issue is, well, because what you're getting at is, well, if the surveys don't particularly say that there should be a full roof renewal, but you know, should that actually go across, and should that be the case that they should be replaced? So I suppose the direct answer to that is, if they don't show that, no, they shouldn't be. Right, so that hopefully that answers your question. The other issue is some of these surveys, there was access issues. Maybe I don't know if there were people not at home or they just didn't want to provide access. You know, and that's their own decision. So that will be why some of the surveys don't have, you know, comprehensive data.
Thank you, Councillor. Right, I'll just remind everyone that we are still in questions. Councillor Cook.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I actually want to take the opportunity to follow up on Councillor Kingston's point. In the briefing note from the officer, I quote from section 3, paragraph 2. Of the properties not assessed for the blocks, therefore there is an assumption that the roof is in the same condition as others. I think that's getting to the point of what Councillor Kingston said. We've openly written it into a report, we're making assumptions. These people deserve better than assumptions. Can we make sure we're not taking assumptions and ensure every property is assessed, please?
Councillor Smith.
Yeah, I think what you might be referring to is the fact that, and by the way, when we're talking about assessed or surveyed, we're pretty much talking about the same thing here, so just for clarification purposes, because I think there's been some confusion on that before. So yeah, I mean, you know, if they've not been assessed, you know, it's how you define that, because it's like, well, has somebody turned up to do the assessment or do the survey and then completed a survey to say, well, I've done the survey, but I haven't got any access. And then is it then reliant on stock condition data? I think there has been an element of that. And I don't agree with that. So we need to take all elements into consideration. I don't know what to do in terms of, at this moment in time, you know, if access is not given, does it fall back to just stock condition data and just the age and the life of those materials? I don't know at the moment, but that's definitely a very important point.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bain, you have a question.
Yeah, thank you for this. Now, the focus tonight is obviously on the 44 properties, and it's quite right it should be, because they've been through enough, I think. But I was reading the members' briefing, and it says there are 399 leasehold properties in Tamworth. My question is fairly simple. What about the rest?
I believe, and I'm only speaking on what I know, that's potentially properties further down the road. But I would like to get back to you on that with a written answer within the week.
Councillor Coates.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is, at the end of all this, is it possible to change the person that won the tender at all and the actual contractors? Because, like I say, I live on these roads. I've seen some of the states of these roofs. It's all well and good saying, yeah, we're going to look at everything, but we're still going to give it to the same building company and they're going to subcontract it out and the standards will not be there. So obviously, I'm just basically, will it be the same builders at the end of this consultation? Thank you.
So just for clarification, are you basically saying that you wish to, or you're asking, is it possible to change the contractor that's already been agreed?
Can I be careful we're not getting into commercial status here, because obviously a contract has been let to a company. If this council opens itself to legal action if we continue down this line in public, I would suggest we stop now on this line of questioning.
Councillor, I think that's a very wise piece of advice. I don't think there's any need to go down that particular line. Okay. Councillor Wade.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before we had this assessment from the independent or whoever the council has appointed, when was their last assessment done? Do we know?
I wish I could answer it. I've only been in the post for 3 months, so I will find out for you and write back to you within 7 days.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Doyle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The question I'd like to ask of the Cabinet member is that you've given an awful lot of answers tonight, and you are under the spotlight because you've only been in this post 3 months. But what the residents want to hear, or the leaseholders, is that they are a primary concern in the process. Not that the process itself is the be-all and end-all, which is what I'm hearing tonight, and I find it very disheartening. The residents want to hear that you are actually concerned about them and they're not a secondary value. So could you please look to bring them in as part of this rather than going off in the direction you're going?
Councillor Doyle, I refer you to what I said earlier on about grandstanding. Please try to refrain. Councillor Wadrup. Oh, I'm so sorry, Councillor.
Yeah, well, hopefully I have actually portrayed that in my opening comments. Absolutely, and I've met a couple of the leaseholders and we've had some dialogue. And as I've said in the strategic strategy, in the review, I want to encompass the thoughts and comments from leaseholders. I believe I outlined that a few times, including a leaseholder forum, and having a mechanism to incorporate comments from leaseholders. So hopefully that came across to other members.
Thank you. Councillor Wadrup.
Yeah, Councillor Smith, just asking the question about the stock condition data. Can you answer why that's not been provided to us before today? Because that would have been useful for tonight with the debate that's going on and for the questions.
Thank you. I have to be careful what I say here. So I would like to have had that information in full, so it could have been presented in more detail. That's an ongoing journey. So that's something I will be seeking out and hopefully we'll be able to provide in a readable fashion, hopefully not too far away.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wadrup, you wanted to?
Yeah, I mean, these are just the basics though, aren't they, for these kind of debates that's going on tonight. And I think it's disappointing that as a council they haven't provided us with that information, because we're all here debating something without the correct evidence in front of us. So could be, I know you said that you would do it, but I think going forward, could you just make sure that that happens?
Yeah, definitely. You know, stock condition data is obviously a crucial element to this whole decision making. You know, all I can say is that from the information I've received, you know, we're at a position where, you know, there are properties that are determined as end of life. Hence this whole the reason for a lot of this happening, and the wanting for the renewal of these roofs. But as I've said before, I will come back with further information.
Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hopefully my last one, I promise. Hopefully. Final point for me, Councillor Smith. And again, as you say, rightly say, you've been in post 3 months. This isn't your fault. I'll say that openly. One thing remains for us this evening, for me, Mr. Mayor. It is a question, if you just give me a little bit of leeway. Myself, former Councillor Chris Cook, former Councillor Michelle Cook, former Councillor Simon Goodall, who was here a second ago, were fighting for this through scrutiny a year ago. We said there was a problem a year ago. We took recommendations to Cabinet that were ignored. It's took me pushing this to full council to finally get enough people to open their eyes. There's a problem. Now, the resolution you're proposing, I support, and I'm going to vote for it. I think it's brilliant. The problem it leaves, and this is my question, is the sword of Damocles is still then going to hang over these people for potentially another year of are they going to have to suffer these costs or not? So while it is right we go and review, we are continuing to hold the sword over them. Now, I have personally apologised to every leaseholder I've spoken to because I was leader of the council in 2019 when they started. And if any of that is my fault, I'll say I'm very, very sorry again. But I've fought hard to make up for that since. Who in this council right now is going to give them the apology for not listening last year? They're owed an apology for getting to this point. And I was going to ask, would you in your representative position, without it in your thoughts portfolio, just say sorry to them for getting us to this point as a council? Thank you.
Well, one thing I would say that I would apologise for is that, you know, before obviously I was portfolio holder, I can't attest to, you know, what happened there and why certain, you know, recommendations weren't met. Who knows? All I can say is, I think since the corporate scrutiny meeting in June, you know, really from that, I suppose, I realised this was an extremely pressing issue. So all I can say is, you know, I've tried my hardest to dissect all the information that's available. I always came across it in a pragmatic view. I said that, you know, before, you know, this meeting essentially, I would want to be happy that I have all the information to present to you members. I'm not totally happy that we have all the information. I so wanted to get this issue resolved. You know, we were up against it in terms of time, but you know, my thing with this is that, you know, we could have gone full pelt and said, you know, the law's the law, pay up, that's what you signed to. But the journey there and, you know, the procedural part, I'm not talking about the legal part, but the procedural part, making sure that we have all the information at our disposal to make proper judgments. You know, I wasn't content with that. So this is why this has happened. So yes, the issue lingers on, but hopefully, in respect to my opening comments, there's a little bit of, you know, confidence, I suppose, that actually we're kind of on it. And I think, you know, the rest of the cabinet as well, you know, we're here to, you know, critique every aspect of this issue and the wider TPC as well. So, you know, to find out all the answers so that we can come back to you, you know, members and leaseholders with all the information.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kingston.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's really to touch on the question raised by Councillor Bain, which is very valid. And again, we didn't get anything too clear on this. Okay, we're talking about 40-odd leaseholders tonight, but I've been in communication with leaseholders on the Mercian ward, in the high-rise blocks of flats, and they've been following this issue. Are the lessons learned from this process that we're going to take these residents on over the course of the next 6 to 12 months, are the lessons going to be plugged into policy moving forwards to ensure that all of those 300 to 400 odd leaseholders, which will only increase in number as more buy-to-lets are sold, will that policy, or will this inform future policy to protect all leaseholders across the town of Tamworth?
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely agree. You know, we've got more down the road. I did say in my opening comments, you know, if this issue wasn't addressed effectively, you know, we do risk revisiting it, as has been the case for a long time now, for years, quite frankly. So I do agree with your sentiment on this. You know, we need to formulate, you know, a strategy that we can all agree on. And, you know, hopefully then, any further decisions down the road, you know, we're not all up in arms fighting over lots of bits and bobs. We have a bit more of a clear consensus, which, you know, is to the benefit of TBC members and, importantly, the leaseholders.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wade.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the residents behind us, who Councillor Smith was very reluctant to say sorry to, I will say it for you. We are sorry that this place has let you lot down.
Councillor Thurgood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I ask in future, so the question, if Rob Barnes, the officer, is sending information out to members, things like the lease, can we have it in plain English rather than legalese that it came out in? Because it took a fair amount of reading. I got through it. The thing that sort of struck me was that basically the council owned the outside of the property, the roof, the base, and the, I guess, the plaster within the house belongs to the leaseholder. What's the incentive for future buyers to actually buy a house? If you say 125,000, I don't know what the cost is of purchasing a house, but if that's over 125 years, that's £1,000 a year, which equates to, I think it's about £83.50, something like that, per month.
Councillor, this is in questions question at the moment. If you could get to the question,
that is the question.
We'll debate after.
Yeah. So, where's the incentive for these people to have bought the house, shelling out a lot of money, only to find that they're liable for the costs of repair? Now, I'm sure within the lease agreement, it's probably spelled out quite clearly, and providing the solicitor that's acting on their behalf tells them that, then okay, they understand that. But really, I think when we actually reach out to people that are looking to buy their houses, for goodness sake, let's tell them what their responsibilities are. That's it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor?
Yeah, I can't speak for, you know, Rob Barnes on the first point that you've made. All I can say is, you know, I can't say anything specific because everyone's got their own reasons for taking on these leases. All I can say is, you know, coming into the strategic review, as I've said before, the feedback and the comments made by leaseholders, hopefully we can capture and take into consideration for, you know, future decisions.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cook.
Apologies, Mr. Mayor. I forgot. One of the leaseholders did ask me to ask this question today. I forgot, so I'll quickly throw it in here. Some of these leaseholders are in their 80s. This process has left them in fear their roof's going to collapse by this weekend. On the back of the decision we make tonight, which I think is where we're all going, can this council quickly write to these 44 leaseholders explaining the process has been followed and their roof is not about to cave in, please?
Councillor Smith.
So I think that's some very specific questioning in terms of like specific properties. So I probably can't answer that in a specific nature that you wish. All I can say is just a reminder, the motion that was set forth had the comments, unless there is an urgent need for works to address issues of health and safety or structural integrity. So I'll be speaking to TBC, the executive, to make sure that we have not forgotten any of these properties that fall under those health and safety concerns.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Doyle.
Bit of a blue sky question. Has the council considered buying back the properties and giving the residents the opportunity to continue as residents under the council? Have the residents been given that option as well? Thank you.
Councillor Smith.
I'm not sure whether that's an option that they have necessarily. I believe it's potentially based on a certain set of conditions, potentially financial. But yes, I'll certainly get that information for you and write back.
Councillor Cook.
Apologies again, Mr. Mayor. I just want to follow on from my last question. So we can't say definitively right here, right now, other than an act of God, one of these roofs won't cave in by the weekend. I think we can categorically say, other than an act of God or struck by lightning or something, these roofs won't cave in by the weekend. Can we please reinsure tenants very quickly their roof is not about to collapse?
So I think, you know, we have to be a bit careful about this because you know, at the end of the day, I'm, you know, a portfolio holder. I'm not a structural engineer. So I do agree with your sentiment. We need to make sure that obviously there aren't any properties, as you say, about to cave in or fall down. I totally agree. So that will be the top priority in meeting with the executive TBC, is to make sure that those properties that have had any potential for any catastrophic failure in the short term, we identify those and we make sure that we're looking after those as top priority. I hope that's a good enough answer for you.
Councillor Thurgood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. From what I've read in the report today, if somebody sneezes and a surveyor needs to come in, then bang, you get charged for it. In light of what's going on, can you assure us that, or ensure the people behind me, that they won't get charged if the surveyor knocks on the door and says, well, we've done the blanket look at your roofs based on history of other properties. If we come in your house, then we're going to charge you. Can you confirm that that won't happen? Thank you.
It's with all respect, it's sort of a bit of a bland, unspecific statement. So, but I do agree with your sentiment. What we're trying to say is that there needs to be a proper survey, right? And for that survey to happen, there needs to be full access to the building, and that information to be combed through methodically, and then also incorporate the stock condition data as well. So I agree with your sentiment. We need to make sure that actually the evidence is that actually there is a justifiable reason why there needs to be renewal. So I hope that's good enough for you.
Councillor Thurgood.
I don't think that he's actually answered my question. It was a simple statement. If a surveyor has to go in to inspect the property, do they get paid? Does the surveyor need to get paid for that service by the leaseholder? Thank you.
Sorry, is your question, does the surveyor get paid?
Is there a charge to the leaseholders for the surveyor attending the property?
I believe, and I might be wrong on this, I believe it's incorporated potentially in the cost, but I might be wrong. So that I'll have to come back to you. Okay, well, why did you ask me the question then? Is the answer in the executive report?
In view of the fact that we are looking at ways to help the leaseholders at this present time.
Councillor Thurgood, we are in questions at the moment. If we can move on to debate, we'll tackle that problem there. Okay. Right. I think we've done questions to death actually at the moment, ladies councillors, and I think we are now going to move into debate so that we can ask questions. Councillor Jay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, lots of questions, lots of great questions, and I think all the questions are what all of us in this room have been asking. Right? I think we're all in agreement. I think that's one thing it showed us. Obviously, these people are leaseholders. We refer to them as leaseholders, but they are residents. They're human beings, as I said earlier. They've got lives at the end of this, so I think it's important just to always remember that, which I think we are. We all know and appreciate that. Councillor Smith referred to 6 months. I think he was right to be cautious and not overcommit tonight, overpromise, because we want to make sure we get it right. But there's absolutely no desire from anyone on this bench, and I believe no one in this room, to drag it out any longer than it needs to be. Right, it's already gone on long enough. If that can be done sooner, great, but it's more important to get it right once and for all than say we're going to do it any sooner. I think Councillor Smith has actually shown that he's not procrastinated on this whatsoever. We've touched on earlier that he's been in the role for 3 months, 3 months tomorrow. He's actually worked flat out on this to get us to this point. So I think everyone appreciates that, but if they don't, he has worked flat out on this to get us to this point. He's done a fantastic job of getting under the bonnet of this and constantly, within our discussions, bringing it back to the fact that there are human beings at the end of this. So stop just looking at the process, we've got to look at the impact. So he's done a fantastic job of doing that. We're all conscious of that, and we'll be conscious of the impact on residents at the end of this review. To Councillor Dawes' point earlier, obviously, absolutely agree. We'll have residents in mind and the impact on them. So that was it. I think we're all in agreement, and I fully support the motion to do a strategic review, get it right once and for all, put the subject to bed that's fair for everybody, and then use the learnings from that for the future so that we're not talking about this again in the future. So fully support it, and well done, Councillor Smith, for the work done.
Thank you, Councillor Jay. Anyone else want to join into the debate? My goodness. Oh, Councillor Kingston.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's really sad that we've gone 12 months on. I remember a question asked by these residents 12 months ago, or thereabouts, I could be wrong, to the then portfolio holder, who came out with quite an insulting response to the residents, which is why we are now at the point that we are now at in this chamber. The motion, and I'm reluctant to call it a motion because it's such a wordy piece, we really do need to see that written down and to be able to understand it. But because it's going to Cabinet, that's the point at which scrutiny can look at it again and feed into it. So I'm quite happy with what you've said so far this evening. But my only concern is this business, and I asked you twice, and I know we're not at questions, but I'm just saying it to the chamber to put on record. Why I'm having a problem is purely over this business about, and I'll forget the word independent if it helps, is about the surveys of each property as best as you can. God, you know, do your best to survey each property. Yes, you might have some grumpy resident who doesn't allow you access. I get that. But for goodness sake, get every property surveyed so that you know what needs to be done. And if you guarantee that, then I'll support this motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Smith.
Yeah, I'll do my absolute best to guarantee that for you. I totally agree. I mean, the surveys at the moment, I think in terms of like raw data, there's only really a couple of pages to them, and then you've got all the pictures as well. So, you know, it does need to be more comprehensive. I cannot disagree with that. So I will fight to make sure that that's done, and actually, you know, leaseholders feel comfortable that actually a solid bit of work has been conducted on the property.
Thank you. Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't sure who was summing up at the end of this debate, whether it was myself or Councillor Smith, but as we've now both spoken in debate, neither one of us can sum up or speak again after I've finished, which is interesting. do concur with Councillor Kingston. Just want to really expand on this, as I did in my questions again. There was a number of councillors in this chamber. There were Labour councillors, there were Conservative councillors, there were independent councillors who were saying a year ago something was wrong, something was flawed. Corporate scrutiny, which Councillor Jay, now Deputy Leader of the Council, chaired, came and organised a working group that was very cross-party. We delved into information, we spoke to officers, we really dug, and we had some serious concerns. We took 7 recommendations to Cabinet that were completely ignored. We continued to fight. We finally pushed from corporate scrutiny a motion to full council to try and get a question here tonight, which has finally got us to where we should have been a year ago. The lesson we really need to learn as a council right now is let's forget the politics and just start listening to each other, because enough people were saying 12 months ago this was wrong. And it sounds like now there's a concurrence amongst councillors around the chamber, something is wrong. Now this review may happen, we might get back to the same point, and we might need to start asking some even bigger questions, but can we start listening earlier? Because these residents did not need to keep going through this. As we go through this review, can we make sure we keep asking the same question over and over again? Just because legislation says we have to, doesn't mean there's not other case law out there, or other ways of approaching it, or other ways of specifying, is it a repair, is it a repair? You can find things if you're clever enough to help people. But we've gone down the same line with this issue, local government always falls into sometimes. How can we not do it, rather than how can we find a way to do it? Let's approach this with some optimism that we can actually help people. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Jay, you have a point of order?
Yeah, we talked earlier about not making it political and grandstanding and all of that. Well, you've just said there that nothing happened. That is not true. We talked earlier about Councillor Smith has spent 3 months solidly working on this. The amount of discussions around here that have gone on about this, to say nothing has happened, is not true. There was a cabinet meeting, following the recommendations. I was the chair of corporate screening at the time, etc.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, is this a speech?
I'm answering the point of,
Please,
of order.
Wait.
There was the cabinet at the end of February. There was then 1 month. Then there's the election period. And Sam's in the role. So to say nothing's happened is not true. He's been working flat out. So point of order, he keeps saying nothing's happened. People might start to believe he says well, nothing's true, but it's factually totally incorrect. So we shouldn't be saying that.
Councillor Wade.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Coming and listening tonight of all this, I just think that we could have come to a conclusion a few years back. Because I think we're looking at this survey now of what's happened. Obviously, there's been a report before of this survey. What must have mentioned something about these roofs being out of date or they need repairing. And sure to God, these people pay a service charge. There's people been going to them places, to these flats, what I'm talking about, and doing maintenance on them. Sure to God. So, if they've been going and doing repairs and maintenance on these, why didn't anybody pick it up about these roofs? And it's come to a point where these people are going to be hit in the pocket by thousands of pounds when a couple of years back, or 5 years back, or even 10 years, it could have been stopped. And it'd have been a less charge for these people. And I'd like to say to Councillor Smith, moving forward, I'd like you to delve more into this and look back at what other reports have said and what could have been done from that last report to this report, in the middle. Because somewhere, these roofs have been mentioned, didn't they? 30 years or 20 years, whatever out of date, or they need fault here. Well, if we go in there and servicing them and these people are paying a service charge for the people to go out to repair them, let's get the reports back off these people when they go out and repair these properties in future. So in future, other people don't end up in the same situation that these people find themselves into.
Councillor Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to come back to the point about the surveys and the fact that you haven't been able to survey some of the properties, and that takes me back again to the communications. I think it could well be that some of the residents didn't want anybody in their house to survey out because they'd already had that bill, and we said they weren't invoices, but the stuff that we were shown, they were invoices, and people were frightened, and they thought if we let somebody in, then we're okay in this, and it will take on a life of its own. So please let's make sure that the communications are right and people will then be okay to have the surveys done. Going back to looking at the cost, one of the things I forgot to say earlier is we're looking at the cost for the leaseholders, but we do have to remember for the other properties, we've got to foot that cost. So we need to get the cost right because the council will be paying for the council tenants' ones and there will be implications going forward, as we've said. And I'd just like to finish on saying thank you to these people. They have been tenacious in keeping on about it. They could have quit quite easily a few years ago and just said, this is so difficult, we're just going to roll over and let you do what you want to do. So thank you for keeping going, because you have set a precedent now for how we go forward as a council.
Thank you. Councillor Bain.
Yeah, I do want to echo Councillor Dean's remarks about the tenaciousness of you people. You frighten me. I don't know what you do to the rest of the council. You're brilliant. What worries me is that there may be areas of Tamworth where there are not people like you suffering the same sorts of challenges, and that's something that I think the working group needs to pick up on as a matter of urgency. And about the working group, one of the biggest challenges throughout all of this, and I met with groups of residents and I heard their concerns, and I saw for myself the impact all of this has had on them, on their health, on their mental well-being, on their quality of life, on their families. I saw it all for myself. And what I never want to see again is somebody of pensionable age crying in a meeting because of the pressure this council has put them under. I did not come into this council to present the council's views to local people. I came on this council to present local people's views to this council. And that is how we must continue to operate. And that's how this review group must work. It must communicate regularly with people in plain English, please, not in legalese, in plain English, to say where the review is going. And it must do it in a proactive basis, not wait till we're asked. That's what Councillor Dean was talking about, getting out there and talking with people. Because let me be clear, if this doesn't work, and I can't think, I mean, I'm quite a calm person by nature, but I can't think of another issue that's made me more angry than this. In all of the years, and this is not the first council I've sat on, I've not seen anything that's made me more angry than this. And if we don't get this right, if we don't sort this, and we don't satisfy those people that they're getting a fair deal, because none of them ever said to me, I don't want to pay anything. What they want is fairness. That's all they're asking for, and I don't think that's unreasonable. So we have to be reasonable in turn. And if we're not reasonable, then I have to say that we could easily stand accused of being a council that knows the cost of everything and the value of nothing.
Councillor Oates.
Thank you for remembering my name, Mr. Mayor. What we're talking about memory, I'm going to correct Councillor Cook on an issue, or on a point. This hasn't been kicking around for 12 months. Councillor Cook raised that in 2019 was the start of this particular process. And the reason I say this particular process, I became portfolio holder for housing in 2004. There were two issues on the desk at the time. One was stock transfer, and one was leaseholder fees for repairs to the high-rise flats. That's ended up in court, which the council lost. We have then had a plethora of portfolio holders, and every single one of them has had to deal with leaseholder charges at some point. Every single one of them has asked for changes in communications. Every single one of them has asked for ways around charging leaseholders and ways around evaluating the cost better. The fact of the matter is, this is an extremely tied down situation. What we can do is we can improve how we communicate. And the reason I say we can improve how we communicate, I was corporate scrutiny chairman 2017, 2018, I think it was. And we called the then leader of the council in, and roasted him over council communications. And the example I gave then, I'll give again now. If you fall into rent arrears as a council tenant, you get a letter off the council to say you're £2 in arrears. Costs 30 quid to generate a letter, but we'll leave that for a minute. It tells you you're in arrears. It then tells you, if you don't pay it, we're going to take your house off you. Please contact us immediately before we do. We are great at following the legal requirement. We are absolutely appalling at following the human requirement. And the situation we have here, I think it was mentioned that there's an issue about the value of the cost and the charges, but there's not an issue with a charge has to be made. The issue is the value and how we operate as a local authority. I've spent 20 odd years saying the big bad council, and we live up to this big bad council reputation because we treat people in the legally required way of treating them. Put the fact we're going to take the house off them on the back page, but get the message across that we need to communicate and we need to help these people out. The only other point I wanted to raise was we should never forget where these repairs are funded from. The housing revenue account is funded by the rent payer. It's not funded by general fund and council tax. So we have to be very careful when we come out with statements such as the council has to watch its budget and has to balance the books. The council has to look after the rent payer who are sharing these properties with the leaseholders. We have a responsibility to look after all of them. If this does nothing more than gets better engagement and better communications, we've taken a step that I've been chasing for the last 19 years, along with Councillor Cook, who had 11 years as leader, along with the other former Councillor Cook at the back, who had a number of years as portfolio holder, who had the same issues and the same arguments. When it comes to turning the supertanker, sometimes Tamworth Borough Council achieves wonderful things and lets itself down on the basics. And the basics here are our duty of care for emotional and well-being and support for our leaseholders, our tenants and the people that we're making decisions on behalf of. We should never lose sight of that. I welcome this review. I'm disappointed it's going to take 6 months, but you know we've been talking about it for 19 years, so 6 months is relatively short term. But we need to get some answers. We need people to realise that actually we value them as residents. They're not just an inconvenience in a block of houses where we want to put a new roof on. They are people living their lives and don't want disturbing. In terms of, there was a throwaway comment earlier about a grumpy resident might not let them in. It's not always about a grumpy resident, it's about a whole raft of issues. And if we don't get in there the first time, go back and knock the door again. Drop a note through. All you guys in here spend months every year knocking on people's doors as politicians. And if we don't get an answer, we go again the following week. And we go again the following week, and eventually we get the door slammed in our face and we know not to go again. But we keep trying, and it's that human element we should never lose sight of. So for me, I welcome the fact we're doing this. I welcome the fact it's coming through and it's being scrutinised. What I'm fearful of is we are in the same situation we've been in for the last 19 years, and we all have the same passion, but we fail to actually deliver it when the report comes back. So that's the big concern for me. But I fully welcome it, and I do have to leave in about 12 minutes, so if we're going to a vote, let's go.
Thank you, Councillor Oates. I think if everyone has finished with debate, we should perhaps proceed to the vote. We have a motion that's been proposed and seconded, and we would now proceed to the vote. Can I ask for those in favour to raise your hands? Could everyone, please, whenever we do this, can you put your hands right up, because we sometimes find it hard with these horribly poor eyes of ours.
You, Mr. Mayor, for?
I'm abstaining. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Right, that is carried. And that will now go back to Cabinet. And I'm sure that following this evening's meeting, The thing that is impressed upon us all is that the thing that's most paramount in this whole debate are the people at the back of the room and those who are watching on TV and those who are affected by this problem. They are the people who matter. They are the people who count. We've got to look at this and get this matter sorted swiftly and correctly, fairly and properly. And I'm sure that councillors in all parts of this room will want that to happen, and will do everything that we can to expedite this and ensure that this matter is sorted and gotten out of the way with as quickly as possible and as fairly as possible. Right, ladies and gentlemen, I can now conclude the meeting at 25 to 8. Thank you for watching on YouTube, and I will close the meeting. Thank you all very much for attending, and a very, very safe journey home. Good night all.